Alright, let's get this party started. Welcome, class, to Classics 160B1. Meet the Ancients! I, of course, am your professor, Dr. Rob Steffen. And if you sat around all weekend thinking, I wonder what comes after the Roman monarchy, well, you are in luck. We get to talk about just that topic today. So let's go ahead and bring down the projector, turn down the lights, fire this thing up for lecture 10.1, Legends of the Early Republic. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk through some of the kind of stories associated with the earliest days of the Roman Republic. And what we're going to find is many of these stories are kind of sort of similar to the story of Romulus and Remus, right? Where maybe when we look back, there is some kind of kernel or nugget of truth within there. But when we look at it, it seems also very clearly that they're inextricably bound with mythology as well. So these stories of the kind of earliest days of Rome are a little bit of a mix between both history and mythology. Let me see if I can get my speaker up here a little bit. I'm going to try to mute and then unmute. All right, well, we will just bring the microphone out today. Can you guys hear me okay right now? If it does get too loud or like whatever, the volume kicks back into gear, somebody just shoot me a message, let me know, and I'll move it a little bit further away. But for right now, we will we'll have the microphone. Anyway, what we're going to talk about today, right, are these early stories that are kind of a mix between both history and mythology, right? And they're kind of so tied up together that it's really difficult to tell to what extent these different stories are true. But one of the big takeaways, and I'll give you this before we even start today, is that a lot of the takeaway points of these stories, even if they didn't happen exactly the way the story goes, are very similar to the stories about the seven kings of Rome, where what they're really doing is they're showing later generations what it means to be a good Roman, right? So even if these things aren't totally historically accurate, they actually are really, really important for our understanding of later Roman generations and what they thought it meant to be a good person. So that's one of the takeaway points. Go jot that down, maybe tattoo it on your arm or something. That's a good one. All right, let's go ahead and fire this thing up, see what we got. We've got announcements today. We're going to recap the seven kings and talk a little bit about that, right? Remember, each of these kings contributes either something to the character of the Roman people or something to kind of the city of Rome itself. And so when we look back at the seven kings, even though in all likelihood there were far more than seven kings in Rome, the kind of later populations of Rome conceived of them in this way, and they saw these seven kings as all kind of contributing to what it means to be a Roman and what the city of Rome actually represents. Then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the early Roman Republic, a little bit about how it's actually structured, right? That's not so much mythology, more just kind of this is like politically the way the Republic works. Then we are going to talk about some of these legends, right? Some of these kind of semi-mythological tales. And then finally what we'll do is we'll conclude with some of the kind of major developments of this time. And what you're going to find there is actually what ends up happening is a lot of the things that later Roman people attributed to the kings, we actually know archaeologically were from this period of the early Republic. So you're going to see the Servian wall come up again. You're going to see coinage come up again. All these things that kind of, in the story of the seven kings, get attributed to them, really they happened a lot later. Anyway, that's our plan for today. Announcements-wise, you guys know the deal. Go ahead and put this thing into speaker view. You can see me. You can see the, whatever it is, the projector screen. Yeah, you can see the projector screen and the words and the pictures. One kind of thing is I do want you guys to get your revised research proposal kind of on the horizon. And I was thinking about this, and extra credit, extra credit. Yeah, all right, so here's what I'm thinking. One of the kind of common things of feedback that you may have gotten on your first draft is that even if the ideas were strong, you may still have a little bit of room for growth in terms of your ability to convey those in kind of a slightly more formal or slightly academic manner. Now, Blake and Karen and Zach don't quite have the time, as much as they want to like really give you super detailed feedback on how to go through that process of academic writing. But we have great resources here at the U of A to do that. So especially the Think Tank Writing Center and the Writing Skills Improvement Program are awesome for this sort of thing. They're all free. People will give you personalized feedback for free. And if you guys take advantage of those, I'm willing to throw some points your way on the revised research proposal. Okay, so it's not going to be a huge thing, but what we'll do is we'll bump you up half a grade. Okay, so we'll bump you up 5 points or so, and so if you get a 90, we'll bump you up to a 95. If you get an 85, we'll bump you up to a 90. And the thinking there is that learning to write effectively actually is a hugely important skill, and something that we want you to work on, but we just need like more person power to be able to give that kind of individualized feedback. So if you go seek that out on your own, you're going to get the credit. Now, the way that works, I'm going to talk more about this. If you go to the Writing Center, or you go meet with one of the people that's part of the Writing Skills Improvement Program, either one of those, and I'll give you extra credit for this. The way that's going to work is they usually give you a follow-up email after you meet with them that says, hey, thanks for coming. Like, here's some of the things that we talked about today. I hope this is useful moving forward. Kind of keep that as your receipt for going to the thing, right? And then TAs, what I need to do, I forget if I actually did this ever, but I will get you guys like a spreadsheet of like everybody's name, and we can just put like a column on there, and then just they can forward you their confirmations. You just put a little check in the column, and I think that'll be a useful way to kind of keep track of everything. But take advantage of it. I mean, it really is a fantastic resource, and it's also kind of one of those things that once you go use it once, you get over the kind of fear of going there. And then you can use it for the rest of your time here at the U of A. Yeah, Eric, that's exactly right. If you go to the website, you can set up an appointment. Yeah, JR. Yeah, that sounds totally fine. Whoever it is that you guys work with to work on these things, the Writing Skills Improvement Program and the Writing Center via Think Tank are two of the big ones. And Friday I'll have links to all that as well. So anyway, do it. You get points. It's awesome. I was laughing over the weekend. One of the amazing things about you wonderful undergraduates, and I think it's undergrads all over the world. I think I was like this when I was an undergrad too, is that like, sometimes for like an actual assignment, right? It could be worth like 40% of your grade. And I could be begging you guys to like put in a bunch of work, and you're just like, no, I don't want to do it. Whatever. And the second you give out extra credit, right? The extra credit could be completely minimal, right? It could be like half of 1%. And everybody's, they will like claw tooth and nail to get that like extra credit point. And I just think it's an interesting quirk, and I love it. Got to bump that grade. That's right. That's right. Okay. So let's go ahead and recap where we left off. Hassan, you are great. Thank you. Let's recap where we left off last time, right? We were talking about the 7 kings of Rome, with Romulus being the first of those kings. And like I mentioned in the introduction, right, one of the big takeaway points is there's probably no possible way that there were actually 7 kings. But each of these kings contributes something to what it means to be a Roman, and possibly something to the city of Rome itself. In terms of what you guys, if you guys are taking notes and making little like notes that say, remember this for test, right? In terms of the names here, you'll want to remember Romulus. That's an important one. I'd like you to remember my boy Numa Pompilius here. mainly because he just has an awesome name. So remember those two first kings. And then remember the last guy. Right now he's called Lucius Tarquinius Superbus at the bottom. We also call him Tarquin the Proud, right? So remember the first two and the last guy. The guys in the middle, you don't actually need to remember their names. Just kind of remember that there were 7 kings of Rome. And we saw, right, we talked now last week about the story of Romulus and Remus and the she-wolf and them founding different kind of competing cities, and then Remus jumping over the wall and Romulus killing his poor younger brother. And then Romulus serving as the first king of Rome. And if, you got a question about like, what's one of the main kind of characteristics that Romulus represents kind of personality-wise, right? What does he contribute to being a good Roman? The answer that like being a strong militaristic warrior, that's what Romulus is really associated with. And he's fighting all these neighboring little towns and frequently moving the populations to Rome. And Romulus' successor, right, this guy right here, Numa Pompilius, he represents kind of the other half of what it means to be a good Roman, right? And that is, in addition to being a really strong warrior, you also have to be religious and pious. Yeah, Numa, yeah. I gotta somehow get that into the final exam, get some sort of musical question. But Numa brings the Vestal Virgins to Rome, right? He closes or opens the doors to the Temple of Janus. Zach, you told me what the answer to this was last time, but I've completely forgotten whether they are closed or open during war. He's got this 360-day calendar, only 5 days off. Pretty good Numa, can't complain there. And then we go back and forth, right? So from a peaceful guy back to a hostile guy, right? Tullus Hostilius, the hostile king. He's fighting the Alba Longans. Remember our story last week about the Horatii and the Curatii? The Horatii being the Romans, the Curatii being the Alba Longans. And the Roman, right? He kept like running away, and then eventually killed the Alba Longans. And then they moved the population to Rome. And this was a common thing. This is how Rome grew in the earliest days. When they'd win militaristically, they'd take that population and they'd actually bring it in to the city of Rome. Then we get another peaceful guy after that, right? Ancus Marcius. He founds Ostia, the port city. And Ostia translates in Latin, it's like very literally like the mouth, right? And this is the mouth of the Tiber River. And you can see up here, it opens up into the Mediterranean Sea. And actually the part of the Mediterranean Sea, it's called the Tyrrhenian Sea, which was, again, the Greek word for the Etruscans. And again, if you go to Rome, when you go to Rome, right, you've got to go to Ostia. It's super cool. And then like, right now it's actually like a mile or 2 inland because like the shores have changed over time. But it's very, very close to the beach as well. So you make a whole day of it. You like go to the site and you wander around all these super cool buildings. And then you just go to the beach for the afternoon and have a glass of wine and look at the ocean or sea, whatever it is. And it is a beautiful, wonderful day. Then we've got the first Tarquin, right? And we can tell from his name that he's Etruscan. And you can't quite see it on this map, but like here's Rome, right? In the darkest of red there. And this little town right here, that's Tarquinia, right? So we think that's where Tarquin is from. Now the first Tarquin seems to be a pretty good dude, right? And his major contributions are like building the Cloaca Maxima, right? The Great Drain, which allows for the building of the Roman Forum. He's the guy who starts the Circus Maximus, which eventually can hold up to 150,000 people, right? And it doesn't look like this in the days of Tarquin the Elder. But, later on, it does. And in the earliest days, it's still important that they have these large-scale chariot races. Then, our sixth king, we've got Serviustulius. And he is known for his giant wall, even though we'll find out today, archaeologically, when they've like excavated parts of the wall, and they look at the pottery within there, and then they're able to trace that back to different periods of time, it probably was built in the 4th century and not the 6th century BC. and I know that's disappointing. But the thing to remember about the Servian Wall here, we still call it the Servian Wall. It doesn't matter that we found out it was built much later. The thing to remember is that it one of the best remaining sections goes right in to the train station, the main train station in Rome, and amazingly cuts right through a McDonald's. Now, when you go to Rome and you go, you're going to get, okay, so you're going to arrive at the airport, right? And the airport's a little bit crazed, but probably the easiest thing to do is to get on the Leonardo Express, right? So that's the train that takes you directly from the airport into the heart of Rome, and it drops you off at Rome and Termini, which is the main train station. No stops along the way, straight from the airport to the heart of Rome. Now, when you get there are going to be 2 McDonald's, okay, at Roma Termini. There's like one up on the main floor, and then there's one down. You got to like take the escalator down. You want to take the escalator down. Now, the first McDonald's on the main floor is fine, right? If you just want food, you can get that McDonald's food. But you don't want just the food. You want to be able to eat your McDonald's next to the Servian Wall, right? It's like a really bizarre experience if you're like sitting at this table here and you're like having your McCafe and getting a cappuccino or something at McDonald's. And it's like at a little break in the Servian Wall, and you can tell people about Serviustulius and the 7 kings of Rome, and how there probably were more than 7 kings, but really they like all contribute something to the character in the city of Rome. Very important. So normally, right, you're going to want to be eating a lot of Italian food. Maybe on your way out at some point in time, you got to go get your McFlurry or McCafe or whatever it is, right next to, right in the Servian Wall in Rome. Yeah, we're still working out wedding plans, so we're trying to figure things out. Right now, Greece just announced that they are having tourists this summer. So if you've been vaccinated or test negative or whatever, Greece is open. So I'll keep you guys posted. Don't you worry. Don't you worry. Okay. Tarquin the Elder. No, Serviustulius also ends up finishing the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, also known as Jupiter Capitolinus, because it's on the Capitoline Hill. And the Capitoline Hill is really the religious heart of the city, right? It borders the Forum. Right now, the Capitoline, there's a set of museums there, which were designed by Michelangelo, which is awesome. And so you can still go up there. And if you go, oh, I saw that, Anastasia. I like, it's like a little bronze bull, isn't it? Like it like washed out in the rain or something. She had a comment that there was like a bronze bull that was found in Greece a while ago, a couple days ago.
Yeah, a couple days ago. It's a full figurine or something.
Yeah, super cool. Who knew that all you had to do for archaeology was just wait for it to rain, and then the stuff just comes out on its own. All right, so Capitoline Hill in Rome today. It sits under the Capitoline Museums, which were designed by Michelangelo, like the Michelangelo, of like the Sistine Chapel fame. They used to be state buildings for Rome in the 15th and 16th century. But when you go into the museums, it's super cool. If you go down to the lower levels there, you can actually see the foundations of the temple of Jupiter Capitolinus or Jupiter Optimus Maximus. So the foundation's all that's left, but you get a sense for the size. This was the biggest temple in all of Rome. Oh, also, we'll see this later in the course, but when you go up on the Capitoline, there's a bronze statue, an equestrian statue of a horseman, right in the center. And it's of Marcus Aurelius. And you're probably thinking, like, didn't we talk a lot about bronze in the first half of the course? And how, like, we don't really have bronze statues because, or we don't have many of them, because people melt them down, right? Like, as soon as, like, Marcus Aurelius is not important to somebody anymore, they would just melt him down and like make swords out of him, right? But people actually thought in the kind of dark ages that this statue was like a statue of Constantine, who's important because he was the first Christian emperor. And they didn't want to destroy the statue of the first Christian emperor because he was like Christian and everybody at the time was Christian. And so they kept it up there And then later on, art historians are like, oh no, that's definitely Marcus Aurelius. So anyway, also a cool thing on the Capitoline Hill. Now, our seventh and last king of Rome is a guy by the name of Lucius Tarquinius Superbus. We translate it as Tarquin the Proud. And he is totally out of control, right? He's ruling with an iron fist. He's not going to the senators for anything. And if you're wondering, right, this is a good question. You're probably like, hold on, I thought we were talking about a monarchy. Why are there senators? Senators are for a republic. Why? What's the deal there? So the senators were actually, that was the term, right? It kind of means like the old men or the old people. And they got their name based on kind of being descended from the earliest families in Rome, right? So if you could trace your lineage back all the way, you were a senator. And that also is the way that you become a patrician, which we'll talk about later today. But Tarquin's just like making decisions without consulting anybody. He's like doling out justice in a super harsh way. His son, Lucius Tarquinius Sextus, is just forcing himself upon senators' wives. And this one event is known as the rape of Lucretia. She is the daughter of Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus, one of the senators. And this is the precipitating event for the end of the monarchy, right? After this, right, Lucretia ends up killing herself. The senators get together and they decide absolute power corrupts absolutely. There is like no reason we need kings in Rome anymore. Let's go ahead and take some back some of the power for ourselves. So this is the precipitating event of the fall of the monarchy and the start of the Roman Republic. Now, so far in your history of Rome, you've got to have 753 BC, right, chiseled in stone as one of the important dates. Here's the second date you've got to remember, right? 509. This is like the starting date for the Roman Republic. And if that date kind of sort of looks familiar, it's right around the same time that we get the birth of democracy over in Athens. And we actually think that later Roman historians are intentionally putting the foundation, right? Like when they're tracing this back to say when the Republic was actually founded, we think that they're intentionally going back to this very specific time in order to create that association with Athens and democracy, right? And Rome and republicanism. And the two people that are kind of most directly associated with the rise of the Republic are Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus, right over here, right? He's the dad of Lucretia. And then this guy, Lucius Junius Brutus, who's another one of the early senators. And they're the ones who lead the rebellion, and they kick Tarquin out of Rome. Okay, now, the Roman Republic's going to last for about 500 years, which is like pretty long, right? You think about like how long democracy lasted in like Athens. It's not that long, right? Like we get like democracy right around 500, and then all of a sudden by like 323, we've got Alexander the Great making the things into an empire, right? So that's 150 years, 175 years. The Roman Republic's 500 years. That's a long time. And the guiding characteristic, right? The guiding ideology. If you remember kind of one thing about what politicians kind of are thinking in Rome during the Republic, it's this. There are no more kings, right? Rome will never have another king. That is how like brutally the rape of Lucretia and the bad things that Tarquin the Proud was doing, that's how much it like impacted on the mind of early Romans, is that this was the guiding ideology for 500 years. Rome will never have another king, right? And power must always be shared. And so this is how they do that, right? We talked about democracy with Greece. The way that this works in the Roman world is that rather than getting everybody together to vote on everything, right, they've got a republic, which is much closer to kind of what we have in the United States, right? They vote on people, and then those people end up making a lot of the laws. Now, you don't need to remember everything on here. I do want you to remember a couple things. So one, the highest position, the highest political position in the Roman Republic was to be a consul, right? C-O-N-S-U-L, a consul. And there were always two of them. That's one of the ways that they are going to ensure that no single individual ever gets too powerful, right? So there are always two consuls, right? So that's part of the way that power is shared. The other thing that they're doing there is that highest position only lasts for 1 year, right? So even if you get somebody terrible in there, you got to kind of think to yourself like, you know, well, what's the worst they can do? They can botch things for like a year and then they're out of there and somebody new comes in, okay? So the consulship is the highest thing. You always have two of them and it only lasts for a year. And that's part of the way that they're ensuring that no single individual gets too powerful. Now, the other thing is that the Senate becomes a formal body over here, right? But the Senate is an interesting one in the sense that like our Senate in the United States has a lot of power, right? Like it like makes laws and votes on things and stuff like that. The Senate in ancient Rome was, in terms of like influence and prestige, very important, right? People thought a lot about what senators had to say. Getting the support of the Senate kind of superficially meant a lot, right? It was powerful to have their endorsement of whatever you were doing. But they don't actually have like much legal political power. Okay? So legally and politically, they don't really have the power to do a lot. Basically what happens is after you hold these offices, then you become part of the Senate, right? It's like kind of when you know, after your year as consul is up, then you go into the Senate. And so there you'll like give endorsements to different things, but it doesn't have the same kind of political power that you would have if you were in office. And that's going to become important later on, right? Right now, not a huge deal. In like a week and a half or like in like 400 years, if you're talking about our time, it's like a week and a half, it's going to become a big deal. If you're talking about ancient Roman times, it's going to be like 400 years and then it'll become a big deal. But it will become a big deal. So remember that. The Senate, like, legally doesn't have a ton of power, but it has a lot of general influence. Now, the other thing that we get in the early Republic is this kind of divide between the patricians, which comes from patres, which means the fathers, right? And they were ones who can trace their lineage back to the earliest days of Rome. And the plebeians, right? Those were kind of the poor folk. So the patricians, right? Those are the aristocrats. The plebeians, those are kind of the regular people. And just like we talked about with Athens in the early days having a big issue with debt bondage, the Romans have this kind of issue. The patricians and the plebs, right? The patricians and plebeians are kind of always, I don't know, clashing with each other. The plebeians trying to get more money, more political rights. In the earliest days, all these things are only achievable by patricians. So the plebs don't get any of this in the earliest days. But they start to actually fight for themselves, all right? And this is a period of time known as the conflict of orders, or it's a kind of an event known as the conflict of orders. And what the plebs do, like their strategy for gaining more political and economic and social rights, is to just withdraw from things, right? You get into a battle, the plebs might just sit this one out, right? They actually have a hill that they go to, a sacred hill, and they would like withdraw to this hill during important periods of time. Something going on economically where you need their help? How about no? How about they just withdraw to this hill? And this is known as the cession of the plebs, because they would secede from different things and kind of get themselves out of whatever was going on. And the patricians realized that the plebs were so large in numbers that they really, really needed them. And as a result, over time, a couple things happen. So first of all, over time, they're allowed to gain access to some of those higher offices. Quaestor and aedile and praetor and consul, eventually they're eligible for those. More than that, they get this new position known as tribune, right? And these are the Gracchi over here. We're going to hear about the Gracchi in a few weeks. But the tribunate is an interesting position. It's only plebs allowed to hold the tribunate. And what they are allowed to do is veto anything, right? So if the kind of main politicians, right, the consuls pass some sort of bill, the tribune of the plebs has the ability to veto that, right? They can say, not going to happen. They have a little bit less power in terms of initiating legislation. They still can, but it doesn't go through super easily usually. But the veto is the big one. So, first of all, they can start accessing other political positions. Second of all, they get a political position just for themselves. And third of all, they get what we see here, the 12 tables. And this is like the earliest version of Roman law. And remember, we're back, like way back when we were talking about Hammurabi's law, and we saw that like one of the reasons this was so important was like, okay, yeah, the laws are still totally stacked against like poor regular people, right? But at least now that they're written down, like you can't just keep changing things, right? You can't just change the rules to favor the rich. Even if the rules already benefit the rich, at least they still have to abide by the things that are written down. So that's another big development for the plebs that results from their kind of strategy of just seceding and taking themselves out of like major different moments in Roman history. Okay, so structurally that's how it works, right? And what you really need to remember here is that that when the senators take over, right, their guiding ideology is no more kings. The republic is a representative republic, right, where you vote on people to hold office. And that the idea behind here is that in the highest offices, power is always shared between multiple people, and it lasts for a fairly short amount of time. We're going to see that, like, at the end of the republic, people will just be like, they'll just be like consul for like 7 years in a row, which defeats the purpose entirely. But in the early days, it works. Okay, now back to our story about kind of like what's going on historically here. Tarquin gets out of there, right? So Tarquin isn't actually killed in this revolt, but he escapes and he goes back to the Etruscans. In particular, the leader of the Etruscans at the time was this guy sitting down over here, a guy by the name of Lars Porsena. Lars Porsena. He's the Etruscan king, and historians have kind of debated about, you know, the extent to which he was a real guy, and if so, like what were his motives? Did he want to take over Rome? Did he want to reinstall the friendly Tarquin the Proud? Did he want to just annihilate Rome? Nobody really knows. But for whatever reason, he marches on the city. Again, we don't know whether that's to reinstall Tarquin or to take it over himself or to just destroy everything, but he marches on the city. And in the earliest days, you kind of remember this image from before. Rome is on the east bank of the Tiber. This is the Tiber River coming through here. This big field. Anybody remember what the big field is called? They did some military training. Yeah, it is the Marsh something. Yeah, the Campus Martius, right? Which actually doesn't come from the word for marsh, even though it probably was kind of marshy. But it comes Martius, the Campus Martius, the field of Mars. That's where they did their training. So everything on the east side of the Tiber River here is Roman. And on the west side, that's where the Etruscans are camped. And in the earliest days, the only way to get across the river was this bridge right here, known as the Sublician Bridge, right? This is the only bridge that's connecting the west side to the east side, and that's where the Etruscans are going to try to get across the river. Now this is bad because the Etruscan army, right, in the earliest days, around 500 or whatever, the Etruscans are way more powerful than the Romans. And so it falls to our first hero of the day, the impeccably named Horatius Cocles. So Horatius Cocles is one of these early legends of the Roman Republic. And what he says is he turns to his fellow Romans and he's like looking at the Etruscan army. And he knows this isn't going to end well. And so he says, look, I'm going to hold them off. Get rid of the bridge. Don't give them a way into the city. And so we've got Horatius Cocles over here, and he does what he can to fight off the Etruscans, while the other Romans destroy the bridge behind him. Now, there's a couple versions to the end of the story. Some versions say that he died at the hands of the Etruscans, right? And he became a legend because of that. Other versions say at the very last minute, right, after the bridge had been destroyed behind him, he jumps into the Tiber River. And like the god of the river, because he'd been so brave on behalf of the Romans, right, the god of the Tiber River ends up saving him as a result of his bravery. But either way, good old Horatius Cocles, right, defending the Sublician bridge and keeping the Etruscans at bay while the bridge is destroyed behind him. First legend of the Republic. Our second guy, this guy over here, Mucius Scaevola. All right, so Mucius Scaevola, what Rome decides to do after this whole bridge incident is take the fight to the Etruscans. And the way that they're going to do this is they're going to send in a spy and an assassin. And that guy ends up being our guy over here, Mucius Scaevola. And what ends up happening is he makes his way, right, all the way into the Etruscan camp, kind of pretending to be Etruscan. And he gets there, and he gets like in front of the Etruscan king, Lars Porsena. And right when he's about to make his assassination attempt, he like mistakes the king. He thinks like the king's right-hand man is actually the king. And he gets like, it's like a case of mistaken identity. So he kind of attacks the wrong person. And as a result, he's identified, right, as a Roman and an assassin. And this is where his bravery really kicks in. This is where he becomes one of the legends of the early Republic. So he's caught, right? And he's going to be put to death, or whatever it is. And what he does is he sticks his hand out, right? And he sticks his hand into the brazier, like the little fire thing going on right here. And he just sticks his hand into the fire. And as his hand is burning off, he starts telling Lars Porsena, the Etruscan king, that he is just one of 300 Romans who has sworn to assassinate him, right? Sworn to assassinate the Etruscan king. And that it's totally fine if the Etruscans want to kill him, right? But there are 299 more of these guys right behind him. And so he's saying this as his hand is burning off. And the Etruscans get so freaked out after this that Lars Porsena like packs up shop and just goes home. And he's like, these Romans are insane. We're not dealing with this. Now, one of the interesting things is that historically and archaeologically, right, if we actually look at the archaeology of the city of Rome, it was destroyed sometime around like shortly after 500, right? You can see the like burn layers in the city. And so we actually do think that at some point in time, the Etruscans did kind of destroy the city to some extent. So whether that was a part of what's going on with these legends, we don't know that. But yeah, Tarquin, we don't hear about Tarquin too much in the story after this. I assume he was a part of this kind of Etruscan crew that came back. But Rome kind of through events like these starts to form a league of other city-states, kind of becoming the first and most important city-state within what they call the Latin League, right? Remember, there are all these different tribes. These are all Latin tribes. Rome becomes the kind of most important out of those. And they start to kind of come up with some rules that are very Rome beneficial, right? So they say that like, all right, if Rome ever wants to fight anybody, everybody's got to send troops. And with all the joint armies, only Romans can control the troops. So we see Rome just starting to kind of exert their influence militaristically in the region. Now, one of the other legends we've got here is a guy by the name of Cincinnatus, right? I grew up in Cincinnati, named after this guy, Cincinnatus. And Cincinnatus was a consul back in the early part of the 5th century, right? Long before 458, right? Years before this. And after his consulship, he became a farmer. But what ends up happening is that in 458, we've got this neighboring tribe, the Aequi. And if we go back a slide here, we can see, right, the Aequi are up in the hills. And these are the Apennine Mountains kind of up here. So the Aequi are up in the hills. They come down and they start threatening Rome. And this threat gets kind of strong enough and powerful enough that Rome's got to do something about it. And they call Cincinnatus back. And they appoint him dictator. Now, dictator to our minds sounds like a terrible word. You don't want a dictator ever. In ancient Rome, it's actually a political position that you could be appointed to that gives you sole power in the city for 6 months, right? There's a limited amount of time. You get sole power for 6 months. And the idea here is that this allows you to make quick decisions when under a powerful threat, right? Sometimes having two people, right, two consuls making the decisions, it takes a long time to get things done because you have to work everything out between multiple people. So they make Cincinnatus the dictator, and within 2 weeks, he's defeated the Aequi, right? They give him complete control of the army, complete control of the city of Rome, and he's defeated the Aequi within 2 weeks. He defeats them so bad, he makes them like walk out. He like, you know, the yoke that you would use for like an ox to tie two oxen together. He like puts those on the Aequi and makes them like march away like they were oxen. I mean, he really gives it to the Aequi pretty bad there. But then the kind of big thing, the important thing there, is that right after this, he resigns. He's got 5.5 months left of being the sole ruler in Rome as dictator, right? It's a 6-month appointment. And he's like, no, I'm good. I'm going back to my farm. And this is why he becomes one of the legends, right? Partially because he's effective in battle. But it's that ability to take the power and then give it up afterwards that makes him such an important character. Everybody looks back to Cincinnatus as like the paragon of like Roman virtue, like doing your duty to Rome when called upon and then giving up power afterwards. And we'll see that like inability to give up power is really what starts causing problems in the later Roman Republic. All right, now our final of the legends of the Roman Republic, or the early Republic today, is this guy Marcus Manlius. And this is taking place in the kind of early 300s, right? The early 4th century BCE, when the Gauls from the northern part of Italy swoop down and attack the city of Rome. And the Romans hold themselves up on the Capitoline Hill. It was much steeper in antiquity than it is today. And what they end up doing is they build this like human pyramid in the middle of the night to try to sneak up there. But there's this sound of like a geese, right? A goose, like makes some sort of sound. Marcus Manlius wakes up and he starts throwing people off the human pyramid. And so he's single-handedly bringing down these Gauls, throwing them off the human pyramid, and saving the Roman people at least for another night. Now, in the end here, Rome actually falls to the Gauls. This invasion that this is a part of, like the Gauls win. And it's happening sometime right around 390. And the Gauls are led by the Roman, or the Gallic general Brennus. And in the end, and just a heads up here, I will give the attendance right after this. I'll bump the time period to 1 p.m., so don't freak out. I'll give it to you. But the Gallic general makes Rome pay for the Gauls to leave, right? He's like, all right, we're going to leave you guys. We won't destroy the city, but you got to give us like 1,000 pounds of gold, right? So Rome gets together 1,000 pounds of gold, and then the Romans start complaining. They're like, these scales are rigged, right? It's one of those balance scales. And he's like, those scales are rigged, right? This is actually more than, you're asking for more than 1,000 pounds. You said 1,000 pounds of gold. And at that point in time, the Gallic general Brennus like turns to them. He takes his sword. He throws it down on the Gallic side of the scales, right? Meaning Rome needs that much more gold to balance it out. And in Latin, he says, Vae victis, or Vae victis, which translates very frequently as woe to the conquered. Meaning, you're going to pay whatever I want you to pay because I just whooped you in battle, right? You have no say in it. You're lucky it's not 2,000 pounds of gold. And so this is one of the kind of formative moments in early Rome where Rome gets beat bad. They get humiliated at the end. And it's something that they really remember for years and years and years to come. Okay, so those are our Legends of the Early Republic for today. We're going to wrap it up there. So our attendance for today is orange. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that you guys have time to put this in. I'll extend the kind of entry period until 1 o'clock today. But go ahead and put in orange. We can get on to D2L and do this here. All right, so you should have until 1 p.m. today to go ahead and put that in. But go ahead and put in orange. Once you do that, we are going to wrap it up there for today. What are we going to start with on Wednesday? Oh, we'll talk about like how Rome actually deals with like its growing power on Wednesday. One of the crazy things, right, is when you look at this. So this is like Rome's power in 500, right? Rome's been around for 250 years or so, and it's just this tiny little area, right? Think about that compared to Athens, right? Athens is getting going right around the same time Rome's founded, and by 500, Athens and the Greeks have like defeated the Persian Empire, right? Like they fended off a Persian invasion. Rome is growing right now, but it's growing really, really, really slowly. So on Wednesday, what we're going to see is we're going to see Rome kind of start to accelerate its expansion from this little area to some of these other little areas to eventually taking over the Etruscans, becoming the dominant power in Italy, and then eventually moving outside of Italy in a series of battles called the Punic Wars. It brings the Carthaginians back into things. You should remember them from the first half of the course. And that is what launches Rome from this kind of piddly little, maybe like regional power to the preeminent power in the entire Mediterranean. Oh, this is good. Okay, yeah, if you're still on here, the PDF is wonky for this week. I will email out to the class about this. The PDF is wonky. It looks like there's nothing on it when you try to read it in the D2L browser. If you download the PDF and open it, it like looks fine. Okay? So that's the wonky thing about it. I'll email out to let people know. All right, guys, have a wonderful couple of days. I will see you back here on Wednesday. Bye-bye, everyone.